Well, good morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. 2 weeks ago, we were excited to welcome the head of NASA's Marshall Flight Center for a discussion about NASA's plans to return to the moon and then onwards to Mars. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Ashley Zumwalt Forbes, the Deputy Director of Batteries and Critical Materials at the Department of Energy. So great to see you.
Wonderful to be here. And man, so sad to be following a NASA contact.
It's a pretty
This
big
will
one.
not be as exciting. I'm so sorry.
Well, that one was a coup because I had actually taken my boys to space camp, and we used that as an excuse to reach out to Joseph and his team at NASA, and they were gracious enough to agree to meet up. So I had a NASA
Wow.
jacket and everything, so it's pretty cool.
I'll have to give it a listen.
Well, it's so good to see you. I think this is like your year anniversary in the nation's capital, if I'm not mistaken. And I think what's so fun about the year, 6, wow, that's wild. So tell us a little bit about your background beforehand. I mean, you're not a career civil servant that kind of jumped into energy, right? Like you're coming at this from a different angle.
Yes, absolutely. So my background's actually petroleum engineering. My first job out of University of Oklahoma, I worked on drilling rigs for ExxonMobil. So I worked 28 days on
Naturally.
yes, natural. Like I'm from Oklahoma, it makes more sense in
Love it.
context.
Yeah.
I love being operational. I love being hands-on. I love the energy business. Wanted to be more entrepreneurial. So I went and got an MBA. Ended up transitioning into a very entrepreneurial suite of companies called Black Mountain, and ultimately co-founded a nickel mining company in Australia. It is a crazy story, which I will not bore you with, but bought one nickel mine and did a hostile takeover of an ASX listed public nickel mining company. We sold that business in 2021. IPO'd a metals and mining SPAC called Metals Acquisition Corp, which is actually a good SPAC story.
You're the one.
We bought an operating. Yes, I know. It's trading at like $14, like a year post SPAC. So that's a success story. We bought an operating copper mine from Glencore called CSA in New South Wales. Amazing management team. We closed June 15th of last year. 1.1 billion US dollars. I stayed on for 6 months post DSPAC as kind of a transition. And then I joined the government in January. Really excited to be here. Absolutely love the mining space, the whole battery supply chain, critical materials. Importantly, I love to do deals. This has been very different, but very exciting.
Love it. So let's drill down about the DOE stuff and then get into everything else. So talk about your specific role, where it fits within DOE, and how DOE has evolved in the last, 2-3 years, right? I think obviously with these massive federal investments from the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS and infrastructure, there's a lot of incentive out there that needs to be deployed to kind of what Jigger talks about, that bridge to kind of bankability, if you will. So yeah.
Yes. 100%. Everything we are doing is geared toward that bridge to commerciality. And I have a whole soapbox on unit economics, which I'm sure we'll go to in the future. But I sit in the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains.
Right.
So I'm a deputy director within that office. MESC is the acronym.
Yeah.
Government loves acronyms. But MESC was set up 2 years ago specifically to deploy Bill and IRA capital.
Okay.
So across MESC, there's $20 billion to be deployed in the form of non-dilutive equity, so grants, as well as tax credits. My piece of this is the bipartisan infrastructure law, battery material processing, and battery manufacturing grants. So late last year, round 1 was awarded. It was about 1.8 billion US dollars. We are currently in round 2 right now. So in the FOA, which is Funding Opportunity Application, it states that we'll be deploying around 3.5 billion US dollars across 8 areas of interest. In the FOA, it says we'll make announcements around August. So please be on the lookout for those announcements.
Right.
Now, how the DOE has evolved is like a subject of great curiosity for me, and I think for everyone. But historically, like, what the Department of Energy is best known for is amazing energy innovations, amazing R&D work. Like you hear ARPA-E and you think, that is DOE's bread and butter. And with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the DOE, in a way, pivoted to a massive infrastructure investor. And so, like, that's a huge pivot in skill set. That's a huge pivot in risk, in things you need to consider. And so, it's amazing. It's truly amazing and very impressive to see how the federal government has turned such a slow moving ship so quickly.
So in preparation for this, spent some time kind of thinking through what does critical materials mean and so on. And so much of it really seems to be tied to supply chain, right? So just help educate folks and frame it, right? Like how much does China actually dominate the global supply chain and even specifically around energy in the United States?
Yes. So my specific focus is on battery critical materials. They're defined on the DOE website, but think of any material that goes into a battery. So what would those be? Nameplate, lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, manganese. This is just a short summary of things that go in batteries, but those are some of the areas we'll talk about today. If you look at these supply chains, there are really a few different junctures of the supply chain. You can say there's mining, there's then material processing. You then have to put those materials into a cell and then ultimately into a battery, into an EV. So if you look at each juncture of that supply chain, China controls, upwards of 70 to, in some cases, upwards to 90% in each of those critical materials. In areas that they don't have domestic mining, they've done an amazing job at making mining investments globally so that they control the mines themselves, they control the processing, they control the battery manufacturing, and ultimately they control the EV market.
Wow.
And that's what my job is here to do is to stand up a competitive supply chain against that vertically integrated monopoly.
Wow. And then as you think through that success, you kind of define a little bit around unit economics. Talk about that and what that challenge looks like for your office.
So this is my biggest soapbox. And really, I think the biggest challenge that lays ahead. Look, we had a disclosure at the beginning that I love deals. I am a banker at heart. I love mergers and acquisitions, but so it's probably no surprise that I view the world through a lens of unit economics. But we live in America. This is very much the land of the free and of the brave and of capital. So in order for businesses to stay in operation and do all the things we so want them to do, to invest in communities, to supply jobs, to be an amazing part of the supply chain, they have to make money. They have to make money to do this. And so, candidly, what we're seeing is China's vertically integrated, and they don't necessarily have the same market forces and market pressures that we do. We are not vertically integrated. We have chopped up the supply chain into several different pieces, which I talked about. There's the mining, there's the processing, there's the battery manufacturing. And at each juncture, not only do companies need to make a profit, but they need to make enough profit to attract investors in order to get the capital in the door to build their plants, which our country is relying on in order to have a secure and separate supply chain to China. So my office deploys 50% cost share grants. And so what that means is we review a variety of opportunities. And the folks who are selected as awardees, we require at least 50% of the capital to be coming from the private sector, but we will give 50% of that capital in order to build the facility and get it stood up. Now, where the unit economics comes into play is what wakes me up at night. Like what I truly worry about more than anything else, professionally, is ensuring that what we are choosing to deploy that capex into
Sure.
will be able to be profitable in the
Yeah.
future. And so trying to find defensible areas,
Mhm.
defensible strategies, where we can compete on a unit economics basis with China.
So how do we in the United States focus on accessing larger quantities of critical materials? Is it domestically? Is it through allies? Because how are we going to kind of build enough capacity? How do you think about that? And how do you weigh kind of environmental concerns, right? Like a lot of the passage of these bills are around climate change. So how is your office thinking through whether it's domestic or through allies, as well as weighing environmental kind of concerns?
So my mandate and the mandate of the Department of Energy does not include mining. So my mandate is from battery material processing
Got it.
through battery manufacturing. So
Okay.
like, for example, I could invest in a concentrator, which is the step you get the ore out of the mine, the
Yeah.
ore goes into a concentrator and you make concentrate. I could
Got
do a concentrator, I couldn't do a mine. LPO recently
it. Sure.
announced that they
Yeah.
can now provide debt financing
Saw
for
that. Yeah. And
mines.
that was a new development, right?
It's a brand new.
Big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
It's something I'm really excited about because I
Perfect.
do believe, we are spending a tremendous amount of capital and taxpayer capital
Yeah.
and effort in setting up the mid and downstream portions of the supply chain.
Beautiful.
But there's less focus on setting up the upstream piece of this.
Mhm.
And I think it's every bit as critical, and should be a focus area.
Nice. We were talking before we went live. We're spending a lot of time kind of helping companies do site selection and exploring the map. And what I've been blown away by is the innovation, like the types of companies, whether it's sodium ion or different types of battery for data centers, et cetera, for storage, and so on. What has been kind of your reaction being exposed to these companies? Do you feel like you're getting enough inbound applications, like from different technologies? What's the kind of feel with, you have this capital? Is the market meeting the opportunity in your opinion? Do you need more companies applying? How do you feel about the response from the private
Look,
sector?
we always love to have more folks apply. I think the best way for us to be good stewards of taxpayer capital is to have the largest possible option set,
Right.
in making those selections. As always, I am forever impressed with American ingenuity and innovation. So incredibly impressed with the applications that we have, but always love to have more.
Nice. Well, what I think has been so exciting about this whole process has been, to your point, that you're not necessarily funding the mining operations. As a result, the kind of geographic map of the United States is pretty broad for these companies to kind of, start in new communities from Oklahoma to Memphis to Nevada to Arizona. How has your office kind of seen, the map roll out and the impact on communities for projects and that kind of ancillary benefit? Because I think our focus has always been in helping these companies. We want them to think about three things. It's people, power, and place, right? So it's like those are the
Yeah.
ingredients that we try to kind of advise and help people on. And once you get kind of in the weeds in these communities, I think it's been amazing to see like there's reactions and enthusiasm to new companies, new technologies, new opportunities. So
Look, I think it's wonderful. So we're effectively reindustrializing the US and breathing hope and jobs and life and um, like cutting edge innovation right into communities that have long not had those opportunities.
yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. We are seeing really like all the way across the US. On the MESC website, there's kind of a map of where all we've made awards across the US. And the impact truly is very impressive. We are starting to see clusters emerge, like
Mhm.
as you would imagine, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to be co-located by your suppliers, by your
Yeah.
off-takers to ensure that you keep down logistics costs
Sure.
and some of these materials are really time sensitive.
Yeah.
So it's just been fascinating. It's also been really fascinating to see what role the states play in this.
Yeah.
like states have been really aggressive with
Mhm.
economic development packages and
Yeah.
in attracting businesses to their state. So it's a completely different lens that I'm looking through than
Definitely.
historically I have. But across the board, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit more about your background and I think how that validates maybe some of these projects for even private sector partners. Like, I don't know if you spend time, talking to bankers or kind of like private sector folks to get them excited to look at these opportunities. I mean, once you kind of fund and support a company from the federal government, right, there's a validation there. Has the reaction from then the private markets, are you seeing it? Is attention being appropriately devoted from the bigger kind of capital holders out there, like the BlackRocks, Blackstones, Goldmans of the world?
Look, more capital needs to flow
Yeah.
here. Like full stop. The challenge in front of us
Yeah.
is enormous. Um, yes, a tremendous amount of good conversations, like really strong interest in the area. I think like there are still challenges associating with figuring out, again, from an economic standpoint, which pieces of the chain are we best positioned to
Yeah.
compete in?
Mm.
And in a lot of ways, the DOE is a leader in determining that. And so the pressure to make
Yeah.
those decisions is certainly not lost on us.
Interesting. How have you seen kind of companies compete for critical materials, right? Is there a kind of concern about access to enough minerals for then creating unique battery technologies that are out there? I mean, this part of the supply chain, obviously. I mean, or are we, do we have abundant sources? Or are you worried about it? How is that playing out?
Look, I worry about everything, Ken. But what I will say is, I don't know if y'all have followed the foreign entity of concern sourcing restrictions associated specifically with the 30D tax credit
Yeah.
that's available for automotives. And so for OEMs to be eligible for the 30D tax credit, they can't source material from foreign entities of concern.
Mm.
So for the big four,
Yeah.
China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is those materials have to come from somewhere else. So it's
Sure.
either domestic or allies. And so it does create almost a two-tiered market.
Mhm.
We haven't necessarily seen uh, premiums emerge in the two-tiered market, but certainly believe that we will in the future once the 30D tax credit really starts taking effect.
Mhm. Interesting. Um, One of the things that we're seeing constantly is the kind of advancements with AI and just power needs. And I feel like even when these programs started, that conversation wasn't maybe as active as it is today. How are you
Yeah,
seeing the kind of power generation needs from AI, from just manufacturing? I mean, we see this often with the kind of properties we look at for clients where they're
yes.
traditional industrial, but they don't have any power. They were designed for distribution, right? So now they're trying to be retrofitted for this new demand in manufacturing, but then 3 years for substation parts, for example, right? Like everything seems to revolve around power and supply chain, right? And that's not even talking about getting access to minerals and materials and so on.
So my answer to that, Ken, very much always talking my box
Yeah.
of mining and supply
Yeah.
chains. But like my counter to the need for power is the need for copper. If you were electrifying
Hmm.
anything, and
Yeah.
particularly like thinking about AI, thinking about like how we are truly electrifying the world, like that's a copper story. I think it's one of the less sexy battery materials. People don't think about it.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
if you look at the needs, at where the demand is coming from, I truly believe the final boss of the energy transition is going to be copper.
That's fascinating. Okay. Very cool. And as these companies you've seen, I mean, I feel like this is so live time, right? But you've put out some capital, some of these companies are out there. How are you feeling about their ability and kind of growth since they've, received funding and support and so on? Like, where are they in their life cycle? Have you seen positive, traction since, awarding programs and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. And so like a wide variety of companies. were awarded under round one. So
Yeah.
very different stages. And I'd say, far and away, really intriguing market developments. I'll refrain from calling out any examples, but
Sure.
I certainly think in terms of particularly developing first of a kind processes and facilities in the US,
Yeah.
um, there are real challenges, and these companies are like stepping up to the plate. I think more than anything, like that's something to really be proud of.
Yeah, 'cause there's a lag, right? Like you'll give some money and it'll be intended to help them grow and
Yep.
get operational. So I think it's we're not even seeing the full benefits yet of so much of the work that has been done over the last
Uh,
2 years. Yeah, interesting.
these are large capital projects, right?
Yeah,
Large capital projects take years. They take
yeah,
years to develop, and then they take a year to scale up and to get to
yeah.
steady state. So, like, the impacts of this are being felt now, but will like only continue to ramp up. And certainly as these go into operation, like will
Mhm.
be full scale impact.
So we've spent a lot of time in past conversations discussing kind of the circular economy, right? Like now, if we're producing a lot more around batteries, thinking about recycling and reuse and kind of being
Yeah.
sustainable. How are you thinking about that? Or you guys looking at companies in this area, and how concerned are you about that end of the kind of supply chain? Because obviously, the ability to kind of recapture materials is probably beneficial for longer term, a circular economy in the truest sense.
Look, absolutely. So my funding bucket is battery material processing and battery manufacturing. It also includes battery recycling. So in round one, we made several recycling
Right.
investments. We're seeing a broad suite of recycling potential across the U.S. Yesterday, we announced $14 million for retailers to turn in old electronics at Staples and Battery Plus recycling facilities to take those old batteries and get them into the recycling supply
Right.
chain. So we're trying to attack it from multiple different
Mhm.
directions. Look, the recycling story is amazing. It's an important one to set up today. Realistically, we still need to mine. In 10 years' time, when you're really seeing these batteries come off the line, the investments we're making today are going to be absolutely
Ah,
critical because you have to establish the competency today. You have to
yeah.
establish the logistics today in order to like be ready to hit it when these batteries are spent, right?
That's amazing. Interesting. I'll kind of wind down with the kind of continuation on that, right? Like, so the International Energy Agency, I think maybe you posted this recently, they predict an increase in production of critical minerals sixfold by 2040. That seems like a dramatically high, need of additional supply. Where, how, I mean, I imagine it's a little outside of your exact, bucket of work, but kind of ties into it clearly. So,
Yes. So that is the question. And I think the answer is just yes. The top
yeah,
line is yes. The critical materials need to be developed. And in order to do that, we need a massive inflow of capital. We
yeah,
need exploration spend. It takes 20 years to get from, that like greenfield exploration
yeah.
through permitting into a mine. And that's a conservative estimate.
Mhm.
So like we need these investments today. And so the more awareness, the more a focus on true financial diligence and ensuring that you can make returns out of these assets, the better off we're going to be positioned when, whatever the number is, when we need to
Right.
have 6x current supply, like maybe we'll have a shot at it, right?
Yeah.
But unless we truly focus on like how are we going to get these materials? Where are they coming from? Where are they being processed? Like, is it a secure source? Like, how does that impact the environment? Like, all of these things have to be considered, but we
Mhm.
don't have the privilege of time to consider
Yeah.
them. We need to be acting right now, and we are, right? But
Yeah.
like more, there's much more to be done.
Interesting. So just as we wind down, you have the next round of kind of responses in August. What else should people kind of be keeping an eye on for your office over the next 6 to 12 months? Obviously, it's an election year, there's an
Huh?
inauguration, there's a lot of uncertainty, but what should people be thinking about with your office?
Yeah. So don't count us out yet, Ken. I recommend, this is such an influencer move, but please like and follow the MESC LinkedIn page. Sign up for the newsletter. The reason I say this is like, this is the best shot at getting first access to new FOAs that are released, and like truly being aware of how you can apply for government funding. So I would say keep a close eye on those.
Perfect. Well, Ashley, it's so great to see you. Thank you for spending some time with us. Incredibly exciting time for your office and DOE in general and all of these projects. And I think it's just so perfect that your background coincides so well with what you're doing now in the public sector. So kudos and thank you. To everyone tuning in, appreciate you watching. It's coffeewithken.com. You can catch up on past episodes and sign up for future ones. And in the meantime, enjoy your coffee and try to stay cool out there. So Ashley, thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.